Today is the first day of the rest of your life.
Both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are my favourite TV series of all time, and I believe El Camino deserves to be held in the same regard. Felina was a great finale for Breaking Bad. It wraps up so many of the series' long-running plotlines and contains quite the explosive ending. It was also the perfect send-off for Walter White. The episode being upfront with saying that he got what he deserved, but also sending him off in a respectful way. Because despite getting progressively more evil with each season, there was still part of a good man buried in there somewhere, and his last good deed was setting Jesse free. But here's the thing, Jesse's overall involvement in this episode is very limited. This finale was the end of Walter White's story, and so he had the spotlight.
This whole thing, all of this, it's all about me.
Jesse Pinkman went through so much throughout the series, and it reached new heights in that final season. Especially with him being held captive under awful conditions and forced to cook crystal meth. So witnessing him drive off to potential freedom in the final episode felt satisfying. And this was enough for some viewers. But for me personally, I wanted closure for one of my favourite characters. And in the hands of writer-director Vince Gilligan, I knew there would be a quality story to tell. We open with a flashback of Jesse and Mike at a riverbank. This flashback takes place shortly after the death of Drew Sharp. Jesse understood the game he was involved in, but he always drew a line when there were children involved. This was the final straw, one that made him desperate to leave this business. And the conversation with Mike is about what Jesse's future could be. Mike says that if he was Jesse's age looking to start over, he would move to Alaska.
It's the last frontier. Up there you could be anything you want.
What seemed like a spontaneous decision towards the end of Season 5 has now been given a whole new meaning.
Alaska's good.
Straight away, I feel this film has already justified its existence. Jesse and Mike have a unique bond. With the hindsight of Better Call Saul, it's clear that at least one reason for this was because Mike lost his son. He also had a similar connection with Nacho for a while, but I would argue it's even stronger with Jesse. And Jesse seemed to look up to Mike like a father, especially as he became less tolerant of Mr. White. So quote-unquote retconning the reason behind Jesse's decision to move to Alaska and now having it be heavily influenced by Mike only bolsters this story.
Start over. Start fresh. One could.
Put things right.
No. Sorry, kid, that's the one thing you can never do.
These lines very much set up what to expect from the rest of the film. Because this is not a hero's journey. It can be considered a redemption in places, but ultimately this is a hard-hitting film about a flawed but likeable individual that is desperate to put all the chaos behind them. Which is why, appropriately, we smash cut over to Jesse as he escapes Jack's compound. We are thrown straight into the deep end and there's a real mix of emotions from Jesse. Part of him is relieved to now be free, but he's also screaming at all the damage that has been done to him. On top of that, he's not out the woods just yet. A convoy of police cars are heading towards the compound, so he parks up on someone's driveway, grabs a pistol just in case, and once the coast is clear, he's on the move again. In the following scene, we see Skinny Pete and Badger playing a video game, in these chairs that resemble the ones on board the Starship Enterprise. That money from Walt certainly went to good use. And with the two being such funny characters, it provides for some much needed comic relief in an otherwise dark story. It's also nice to see small details like their love of Star Trek being carried over.
I ever tell you about my Star Trek script?
Star Trek script.
So they put on a pie eating contest.
How is Spock gonna beat Kirk, yo? Spock's like a toothbrush. Look at Kirk, he's got room to spare.
Spock has total Vulcan control over his digestion.
Jesse knocks on the door, and at first, given his current appearance, Skinny Pete doesn't even recognize him. But he eventually does, and being the good friend that he is, him and Badger assist Jesse with getting the El Camino off the street, and let him crash for the night. Jesse is very alarmed when he wakes up the next morning, forgetting that he's no longer trapped. He even pulls a gun out on his two good friends. This damaged individual still has a lot to get used to. When he registers where he is, he lowers the gun. He then freshens up, and out of paranoia, even takes the gun in the shower. As water hits his body, there is a brief flashback to him getting hosed off at the compound. The shot containing a very similar composition and naturally blending into the editing, and story-wise reminding us of the pain he's endured, and how even the smallest of things like taking a shower will trigger that PTSD for him. Speaking of, shortly after he killed Gale and felt tremendous guilt over it, he shaved his head, subconsciously getting away from being himself. Well, he does the same here too, even though it puts him at a disadvantage by being more recognizable.
Maybe don't, shave and whatnot, be less recognizable?
He then tears a page out of a phone book, hoping he gets a chance later to visit a certain vacuum store. Skinny gives him a burner so that he can phone old Joe, the ideal man to call if you're looking to dispose of criminal vehicles. Unfortunately, when Joe gets there, the LoJack is activated, which means the police will be on their way. Skinny Pete, however, comes up with a good plan. Badger will drive his car and hide it close to the border. Jesse will escape using Badger's car, and Skinny will hold on to the El Camino. And because of the brilliant continuity between this film and the two series, we later find out the plan worked exactly as it was intended to.
The only ones left to go after are you and Pinkman, and I heard they found his car down by the border, so adios, dopehead.
Generously, the two hand Jesse all the money they have on them. And just before Jesse departs, Skinny Pete gives him his hat. The reason stated is so that he can conceal his identity. But I feel it's mostly a goodbye and remember me gift. One that means a significant amount considering we have never seen Skinny Pete without his hat before.
Why are you doing all this? Dude, you're my hero and shit.
As Jesse makes his way through town, we get our first flashback with Todd. Now Todd has always been quite a unique character. On one hand, he is an awful child murderer with a complete lack of empathy.
Tried to, escape. I'm gonna have to visit the little boy.
But on the other hand, he comes across as very caring.
I'm gonna do a better job of keeping you clean from now on, okay?
Part of why Jesse is being held in captivity is, yes, so Todd can deliver more meth and impress Lydia, but it's also because he genuinely views Jesse as a friend and didn't want him to get shot in the head. He was even happy to look past the fact that Jesse ratted him out. Todd does not understand why his treatment of Jesse is wrong. Yet he still knows how to be nice and understands that the small things like giving him some ice cream or a cigarette can make Jesse feel at least a tad more at home. He's like a little boy that isn't properly looking after his pet goldfish. Very different to someone like Gus Fring, who puts on a nice man persona merely to hide his true evilness. Todd feels a lot of the same emotions as normal people, but also has a darker side that he's almost oblivious to. When watching the 5th season of Breaking Bad for the first time, there are already many questions and concerns for how things may pan out. Todd being introduced to this series made this aspect go even further. His unpredictable nature meant that something terrible could happen at any given moment. His personality of being both a nice gentleman and also a sociopath made him arguably more terrifying than any other bad guy. And him being present in this film is very important. The death of Drew Sharp really shook Jesse up, despite it not being his fault. Towards the end of Breaking Bad, he was even looking to give $2.5 million to the parents. Not that money would take away the pain they are experiencing with their boy missing, but Jesse felt it was the only thing he could do. He was also looking to give another $2.5 million to Mike's granddaughter, after getting the impression that Mike won't be about to provide for her. These are two situations he feels guilty about, even though both were the thoughts of his colleagues and not his own. Walt pulled the trigger on Mike, and Todd pulled the trigger on Drew. Todd thought it was the right thing to do to ensure there were no witnesses to the train heist. This is something he shrugs off quite easily, reinforcing his attitude in this film. In a lot of ways, Todd is the antithesis of Jesse. And he also becomes the new Jesse from Walter's perspective. Although Jesse would often make fun of Walt at the beginning, he certainly had a lot more respect for him compared to later seasons. Todd, on the other hand, was always really polite and eager to learn the process of meth cooking, perhaps reminding Walt of the early days in the RV, when Jesse was overwhelmingly impressed with the product.
This is pure glass. You're a goddamn artist.
But after that flashback, we cut back over to Jesse, who is currently stationary in Badger's car, listening to the news through the radio.
The drug kingpin once known throughout the Southwest as Heisenberg may yet claim a final victim. Texas authorities investigating the poisoning of a Houston woman are looking into her possible connection to Walter White's criminal organization. The unnamed woman, who is hospitalized in critical condition, is not expected to survive. White, the former Albuquerque schoolteacher who was the subject of a 6-month international manhunt, was found dead late Tuesday at the scene of a gang massacre which claimed the lives of 9 people. The dollar is down today on the foreign exchange markets after an extremely turbulent week for the euro.
Despite all he went through, Jesse seems sad to hear the news about Mr. White. Walt and Jesse's chemistry is radically different towards the end of the series compared to the beginning. The first season of Breaking Bad had its serious moments, but majority of the scenes with Walt and Jesse felt like they were out of a comedy. Walt was not the type of individual that you could imagine entering this line of work, but he still represented the everyday man, and accompanied with his intelligence was somehow able to provide normality to this abnormal situation.
What are we building?
You said it yourself.
A robot?
A battery.
With a lot of build-up and a slow shift in the series' tone, Jesse would eventually become more of an anti-hero than Walt. And his feelings towards the news aside, I also find it very interesting how the radio host instantly moves on to talking about the dollar being down on the foreign exchange market. We, the audience, got to see all the drama and conflict between these various characters. But of course, to those random people that are listening to the radio in-universe, this is just another story in the terrible world of drugs and violence. Anyway, we then switch over to another Todd flashback, this one providing us with context for Jesse's motive in the present. Because in this scene we discover that Todd killed his cleaning lady for stumbling across hidden money. Despite knowing this woman wouldn't hurt a fly, Todd killed her anyway because he believes that even if there is the slightest chance someone is a liability, they need to be dealt with. And it's also in this scene where we learn exactly where Todd hides his money. Well, that's no longer the case.
Guess I better come up with a new hiding place for my money.
Present Jesse begins his search of the apartment, and checks under the sink, a subtle nod to where he used to hide his meth. Whilst he continues his search, we cut back over to Todd and Jesse, with the cleaning lady getting buried. Todd asks Jesse to grab him another packet of cigarettes, and as he goes to get them, Jesse finds a pistol in the glove box. He does contemplate killing Todd right there and then, but Todd manages to talk him out of it.
On the way home, I was gonna get us some pizza. What kind of pizza do you like, Jesse? Jesse, what kind of pizza?
Pepperoni.
Pepperoni, sure. Classic. I like that too.
Despite that moments ago he got Jesse to bury a completely innocent woman, the confusing character of Todd manages to come across as nice in this conversation, and so Jesse hands the gun back over. Now, from Breaking Bad, we already know that Jesse kills Todd by strangling him with his chains. So why the hesitation here? Well, firstly, the main reason why Jesse is continuing to cook for these people is because they will kill Brock if he doesn't. And despite Jack and his crew being away at this point in time, soon enough they'd put the pieces together and go after Brock. Jesse may have some time to go and save him, but a lot could go very wrong. For starters, he is a wanted man. Even if he doesn't get recognised, he would need to explain the situation to whoever is looking after Brock, something that didn't go too well when he attempted to explain the Ryson situation, of course not aware of the real reason Brock was getting sick. The decision to kill Todd makes a lot of sense short term, but in the long term only creates more issues. It is somewhat similar to Nacho choosing not to shoot the Salamancas in the Better Call Saul episode Rock and Hard Place. Because even if he managed to take them all down, his father is in a very vulnerable position, where other Salamancas can eventually go after him. Or more likely Gus, as the family having easy deaths interferes with his greater plan. The point being there are going to be many cases in the writing where elements appear to be contradictory, but it's the context that can radically change the mindset of these characters. Jesse has to sacrifice himself in this situation for Brock, whereas in Felina, Walter just dealt with Jack and his crew, giving Jesse the perfect opportunity to strike. Anyway, we then have a montage of present Jesse doing a more thorough search of Todd's home. There are many different types of montages and time-lapses throughout Breaking Bad, and the majority of them, especially the cooking ones, were oddly therapeutic, and provided for a breather in the episode. This one, however, is quite different, because a montage is typically used to highlight a large amount of progression in a short space of time. But with Jesse, this search leads to absolutely nothing, and all of this time feels wasted. Out of frustration, he hits his head against the fridge, and hears something fall down. Unfortunately for Jesse, a couple of police officers return to the scene, so he proceeds to hide at the back of the apartment. The officers split up to search the place, and one of them starts in the back room.
Call your partner in here.
Hey, Lieutenant.
What's waiting for me back there, Casey?
Put your gun down! Relax.
You point yours at me, I point mine at you. That's how this works.
There's only one choice here, buddy.
On the ground.
Hey! You two aren't cops.
Jesse pieces together that they are here for the same reason he is, and uses that as a bargaining chip. When they get to the fridge, Jesse starts packing up some of the money for himself.
I'll shoot you, you son of a bitch.
If I don't get this money, I am dead anyway.
Jesse changed a lot throughout Breaking Bad. To begin with, he was a wannabe gangster. But as time went on and he became progressively more entangled in the criminal world, he, like Walt, grew considerably more confident.
You are a blowfish. The blowfish puffs himself up 4 or 5 times larger than normal. And why? Why does he do that? So that it makes him intimidating, that's why.
And that would be the end of this.
No. These assholes of yours, they got an 11-year-old kid doing their killing for them. You're supposed to be some kind of reasonable businessman. This how you do business?
Tell this asshole if he wants to learn how to make my product, he's got to do it my way.
I speak English.
So you understand what asshole means.
The brilliant thing about a TV series is that writers have time to make the extreme character development feel more believable. Looking back at Jesse in the very first episode and then seeing him in El Camino is like looking at 2 completely different people. But it was the gradual evolution that made it work so well. To the point where he doesn't even need to be a blowfish. He has nothing to lose, so his lack of caring when Neil points a gun to his head makes him even more intimidating. And for that reason, Neil doesn't put up much of a fight. And Jesse ends up walking out of there with 1/3 of the money. But as Neil goes to put the rest of the money in his truck, it sparks a memory for Jesse.
I was wondering when you were gonna remember me.
Their paths shall cross again later, but in the meantime, Jesse begins his search for best quality vacuum, desperate for an identity change and to be relocated. When he gets there, he forgets that he is supposed to ask for a new dust filter for a Hoover Max Extract Pressure Pro Model 60. And similar to how professional Gus came across in Season 2, Ed, for his own protection, pretends to be oblivious.
Come on, man, you know why I'm here.
I can't say I do, no.
But shortly after acknowledges what Jesse is here for.
You owe me for that first pickup.
Yes! Oh, you're the guy! Wait, what?
Now, when dealing with criminals, you need your principles. and Ed states that he requires $125,000 for the first pickup, and an additional $125K for this one. But with Jesse being $1,800 shy, it is a no deal. Again, in this game, you definitely need your principles.
Agreed amount or no deal.
You're really willing to blow up this deal over 20 bucks?
Are you?
Jesse tries to make Ed sympathize with him, and Ed has a pretty fair response.
From where I sit, you made your own luck, as did your former partner, as did your lawyer.
It's a reminder that even though we sympathize with Jesse given everything he's had to endure, he is still a criminal. From my perspective, he has more than paid the price for that, but Ed's opinion here is very understandable. And despite that he's only in one episode of Breaking Bad, this film, and a brief appearance in Better Call Saul, Ed is a fantastic character. And that's partly due to the complete mystery of him. We don't really know his background or why he chooses to help criminals, outside of the financial incentive. But from season 4 onwards, he was built up as a savior.
This is a last resort back pocket kind of thing, but if you really got to protect yourself, disappear. Poof. Be clear, this is an end game, if you get my meaning. I mean, there's no coming back.
Ed calls the police, and Jesse believes that he's bluffing until a police car actually shows up. And so he flees with his money. Once the police have left, Jesse phones Ed to see if a deal can still be made if he's able to obtain the extra money. Thankfully, Ed is still on board as long as he receives the full $250K. So Jesse has a plan, and the first part of it involves calling his parents. Naturally, they want to know where he is. So he lies about his location and asks if they can come and pick him up. But this conversation is really a final goodbye, with Jesse taking full accountability.
Well, you did your best.
And whatever happened with me, it's on me. Okay?
Jesse's parents have always been good people. There was quite a limited amount of screen time with them in Breaking Bad, and what we saw of them was from Jesse's point of view, so most would side with him. However, their position is perfectly understandable throughout, and I'd hesitate to describe their attitude towards him as tough love, because it was implied that he had been given plenty of chances but kept returning to drugs. But as good parents, they still always thought of him and never stopped caring.
I'm the favorite? Yeah, right. Practically all they ever talk about.
It's then revealed that Jesse was right across the street from their house. And as his parents drive away, 2 undercover police cars follow them. A similar tactic that Walt pulled in order to have a neighbour go into his property and have Fring's men leave, ensuring the coast was clear before he proceeds to enter the house. And once Jesse enters the home, he goes to the safe and pulls out 2 pistols, which will be relevant for the next stage in his plan. Now it is possible that Mr. and Mrs. Pinkman have $1,800 worth of valuables in the house, but if it isn't diamonds, there's a chance Ed won't accept it as payment. And Jesse is not in a position to sell to a third party given his high profile. His mum and dad are also unlikely to have $1,800 in cash lying around the house.
Cash! I know, in this economy.
Jesse later turns up at Candy Welding. Shortly after him being on the property, strippers arrive. Even Skinny Pete and Badger made better financial decisions. But we then transition to a flashback of Jesse tied up at Jack's compound. Present Jesse will be waiting around for a long time. So from a pacing perspective, jumping to another interesting part of the story is only logical. But it's also appropriate because despite Todd being present, he is not the bad guy in this scene, because Neil Candy is about to become this film's new antagonist. Neil had no clue who Jesse was or why he's been imprisoned. Yet he places a bet with Kenny that Jesse cannot break free due to his good welding. He then casually asks,
Todd, who is this guy anyway? What do you do?
He's a rat. That's all you need to know.
Neil may not be as bad as Jack and his crew, but he had no issue of ensuring that Jesse never escaped. Should Jesse be taking any more lives? Probably not. but our sympathy levels for Neil are not particularly high. So whilst Jesse is waiting for the strippers to leave, he picks up a bug, reflecting how small he feels in this criminal world. Or maybe he just likes picking up bugs, I don't know. Jesse finally enters the building and asks if he can have $1,800. Neil notices the vintage .22 pistol and the boys have a laugh about it. But then, and this is likely the cocaine talking, Neil challenges Jesse to a duel. The winner gets all the money.
Like the Wild West.
With this film already containing a lot of Western imagery, it only makes sense for this scene to fully embrace classic Westerns such as The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Vince Gilligan taking full advantage of that widescreen aspect ratio by recreating typical Western shots, such as wide shots to provide a clear sense of distance, a shot of a gun in its holster facing the opponent, and of course the extreme close-ups of serious eyes. But just like with Blondie, the duel was rigged from the start. He then gets a headshot on Casey shortly after. The rest flee and Jesse has his money. Despite the amount of evidence already on him, Jesse torches the place. Just like he did with the meth lab. No half measures. We then jump to yet another flashback. This one with Walter White, taking place during the episode 4 Days Out, which is important for a few reasons. Walt was under the impression that his cancer had worsened. At this point he had just under $10,000 from meth cooking when accounting for money laundering and Saul's cut. Whilst they're at the diner, Jesse promises Walt that all the money he makes from this batch will go to his family, regardless of what happens.
Your family is gonna get every dime they got coming to them, Mr. White.
And the final line in this scene stands out quite a bit.
You're really lucky, you know that? You didn't have to wait your whole life to do something special.
This line is similar to the most important one in Felina, but of course taking place much earlier.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. I was alive.
Walter had convinced himself from the beginning that this was all to support his family. It becomes clear very early on that this is not the case, as he turned down a job at Elliot and Gretchen's company. Instead, he decided to provide for his family by producing crystal meth. That's bad enough on its own, but you also need to factor in that multiple people were killed before this flashback takes place. And very shortly after, it turns out that Walt was wrong, as the tumour had shrunk by 80% and his cancer was in remission. He was briefly frustrated when he realised he had done all of this for nothing. But that still didn't stop him from slowly building his meth empire. Once you zoom out and look at all the pieces, Walter White was really lying to himself more than anyone else. And here we get a brief glimpse of the truth. There's a strange feeling watching this scene because it's both amazing to see Walt on screen again, but it also serves as a reminder that he was selfishly driven. Something special is not the best choice of words, given all the events that have led up to this point. But appropriately, we cut over to Ed dropping off Jesse in Alaska. This is Jesse's chance to do something special.
Seems to me just the spot for a man to rest up and think on things. If you look around, it's kind of beautiful.
Ed goes for a few details about Jesse's new life as Mr. Driscoll. Afterwards, Jesse hands over a letter for Brock. Yet another reminder of his good-hearted nature.
You have a good rest of your life, kid.
As he drives away, Jesse thinks back to a time with Jane. A smooth transition for our final flashback. It was unfortunate they were addicted to drugs. And even more unfortunate to think there was a slim chance of a happy ending.
2 junkies with a duffel bag full of cash. Like you said, both would have been dead within a week.
But even so, it doesn't change the fact that Jesse's happiest moments were spent with her. And Jane elaborating on her philosophy about the universe was a nice way to end this flashback.
You open yourself up and go with the flow wherever the universe takes you.
Going where the universe takes you? Right on. I think it's a cool philosophy.
I was being metaphorical. It's a terrible philosophy. I've gone where the universe takes me my whole life. It's better to make those decisions for yourself.
This is the perfect quote to cut back over to a beautiful shot of Alaska, before the final shot of Jesse looking quite optimistic about the road ahead. Everything he thinks he knows is just static on the radio.
Whole lifetime ahead of you with a chance to hit the reset button. In a few years, this might all feel like nothing more than a bad dream.
There are many sequels or connected movies within franchises that will utilise nostalgia with the only intent of getting an emotional response from the audience. This is typically done when a story is directionless, and therefore has to rely on previous characters, set pieces, and general member berries. El Camino, despite its many flashbacks, is not one of these films. Firstly, flashbacks have always been an important part of Breaking Bad's storytelling. They can show us important context, contrast the past and the present, give us a backstory, or provide visual foreshadowing. I would strongly argue that all the flashbacks in El Camino tick at least one of those boxes. That opening scene with Mike reminds us that Jesse is now on his own. This aspect feeling even more desolate knowing that Mike met his death in a very similar looking location. On the other hand, it's nice knowing this conversation motivated Jesse to start a new life in Alaska. Mike may be in this scene, and one reason for that is definitely because he's a beloved character, but the conversation is more focused on Jesse and his path ahead. Now, the Todd flashbacks are not really considered fan service in quite the same way, but they are very well implemented into the film. Not only do they contrast with the present, but they also work as a story in isolation. And we get a bit more insight into Todd's mindset, making his character even more fascinating. The Walter White flashback is of course going to ignite the most fan service. Still, much like the scene with Mike, the conversation with him is mostly focused on Jesse. Walter makes a great point about finding something special to do. It's just that something special should not be cooking crystal meth and getting yourself involved in a world of crime and violence. The Jane flashback was to highlight how even though the past couple years have been rough for Jesse, there were still many happy moments. This being the very last flashback before the final shot of Alaska and a close-up of Jesse's face could not be more appropriate. So with the placement of these flashbacks relating to Jesse in the present, the quotes from characters resonating with Jesse, and the additional context it gives to moments in the series, I believe it's more than fair to say these flashbacks have their place. And to be clear, when writing this film, Vince Gilligan did have his restraints. In an interview with Rolling Stone, they brought up the fact that Ed and Old Joe returned from Breaking Bad, and asked Vince, were there other characters outside the core group you thought of working in but it didn't pan out? And Vince answered with, primarily I do want to see what happened to Skyler and Walt Jr. and Marie. I just couldn't figure out how to work them in. If they laid eyes on Jesse, they'd immediately call the cops on him. I couldn't think of a reason they'd believably wind up interacting. Also, I remember thinking during the plotting process, it'd be cool too if we could see Giancarlo Esposito. Could we see Gus in a flashback? But I couldn't figure that out either. You just go where the story takes you. Tracking the continuity of 2 different TV series and a film is quite the task. And when all the pieces are set up properly, it can pay off immensely. However, many ideas would have been thrown away to avoid continuity errors or because they have little relevance to the main story. Hank turning up in the main timeline of Better Call Saul made perfect sense, because he would have been working for the Drug Enforcement Administration prior to the events of Breaking Bad. Walter White turning up in the main timeline of Better Call Saul wouldn't really make any sense, because he would have been working as a high school chemistry teacher. But when the Better Call Saul timeline had caught up, they had the perfect excuse to feature him in 2 flashbacks, and provide the good type of fan service. just as Vince did with El Camino. The production elements of El Camino really distinguish it from the series. The widescreen aspect ratio obviously gives it a more cinematic feel, and allows for some unique composition in the shots. Breaking Bad was shot on film and consisted of many handheld shots, resulting in a grainy, authentic visual style. This felt appropriate to the tone of the series, as it explored this grim criminal world filled with drugs and violence. Better Call Saul was shot on digital, consisted of a lot more stable shots, and utilised many different colour palettes depending on where it takes place in the timeline. This also felt appropriate as the series explored many different areas and didn't focus primarily on the world of drugs. El Camino is this unique blend of the two. It was shot on digital, giving many shots a very crisp look, but it also maintains that more grittier feel that Breaking Bad had. There was so much love and care put into every production aspect of this film. But of course, the real heart and soul lies with the writing of the main character. This series was largely about the impact on people who got involved in the drugs business, and would occasionally explore the impact of drug use on people. Jesse fell into both of these categories, and both ruined his life. Now, these were his choices at the beginning, but as the series went on, he realised how much he regretted those choices. He did some terrible things, but those terrible things would often have some form of outside influence. Not to imply that Jesse is innocent, it's just important context to understand. Because if he was tried for his crimes, these details and all the good deeds he did would be factored in. And as viewers, we got to see that Jesse had already paid the price for his crimes many times. Whether that was getting beaten up, seeing both his girlfriends dead, or witnessing innocent children get roped into this madness. Even with all that, Jesse did not feel punished enough, and his immense guilt sent him down a path of self-destruction. So factoring in the good things he's done and that he feels bad for his involvement in this game, I would say he redeemed himself as much as he possibly could, and deserves that second chance. Jesse was originally going to be killed off in Season 1, once he had fulfilled his writing purpose of getting Walter White involved in the meth business. Not only did he survive the entirety of the series, but he also went on to get his own standalone film, and I could not be happier that he did. El Camino encompasses the brilliance of Breaking Bad.